Welcome to the NWR Resources Conference, November 2020. On the line, we have Bryce Crocker from Jervois Mining. Jervois Mining is one of the largest publicly listed cobalt companies in the world, which also has exposure to cobalt and nickel via projects in the USA, Australia, and Africa. Jervois aims to become a global supplier in battery metals and is completing construction of the Idaho Cobalt Operations near Salmon in Idaho, with project financing negotiations currently underway. It has also recently announced the acquisition of nickel-cobalt refinery in Brazil. It has an impressive board and management team with former senior execs from Glencore, Xstrata and WMC Resources. We have the CEO, Bryce Crocker, joining us today. He is a seasoned mining and natural resources executive with significant experience in base metals, including cobalt. He previously held senior roles at global mining companies, including Xstrata and Glencore, before joining Jervois, where he oversaw the company's mergers with M2 Cobalt and eCobalt last year to significantly boost its market position. As always, if you have any questions throughout Bryce's presentation, please just pop them in the Zoom chat function. Over to you, Bryce.
Thanks, Laura, and thank you everyone for joining. I apologise for the background noise. I'm here in Sao Paulo, so it seemed pretty authentic with nothing. It's never a quiet situation here, so hopefully the background noise isn't distracting. The usual disclaimer, which I'll allow you to read in your own time. So as Laura indicated, I guess we're a group of executives, largely from Glencore, and we've come into Jervois. We've been in the company. I joined in late 2017, so it's 3 years. And so we've been here for a period of time, but we're really just starting to create what we're looking to kind of work on and create what I think is going to be a pretty interesting vehicle in years to come. Just a bit of background, I guess we're bringing a different philosophy. Many of you would have heard this presentation before, so I'll skip through and move quite quickly through the slides with a view for Q&A and also talking around the substance of what we're doing, both in Idaho and here in Brazil. In terms of the relevant, or the most, what I perceive as one of the more important aspects here is really just around the model. It's co-investment. So we own it's around 12-13% of the equity. We put in 2.75 mil a year ago alongside Australian Super when we co-cornerstoned an equity raise. Management and board put in 1.75 just recently, again alongside Australian Super. So we believe in the co-investment model. We're putting our own money alongside institutional investors, and we do believe that there's an opportunity with the right team to really create something unique at this end. And I guess the pro forma cash just on the bottom left, we recently completed a $45 million capital raise to provide us the flexibility that we need moving forwards in order to start building the company. This slide, it's important because this is really what we're looking to improve. So this slide is, it's all the TSX and ASX companies that have exposure to nickel and cobalt from a battery perspective. So it excludes ferronickel because obviously it's no relationship to the battery metals for a ferronickel producer. So if you look across, I mean, essentially there's no companies of substance here, of scale. So since Xstrata took out, Xstrata, my previous employer, we took out Falconbridge, Vale took out Enco. Xstrata facilitated an auction on Lionor, which Norilsk ultimately won, Jubilee left. So there's no mid-cap. There's no company here which actually has liquidity and scale, which is likely to actually present an opportunity for those institutional investors, primarily out of London, New York, who need scale, liquidity. This slide is going to change a lot in the next 2-3 years. I mean, it's quite ironic. I mean, we're the largest publicly traded cobalt company in the world, which is just a farcical because we haven't even started. We're not even in production. But that's the opportunity because the world is going to look very different in 2, 3, 5 years' time as electric vehicles take hold. This slide is going to look different, but it's also going to be, I think, if you look at when we joined in 2017 in a flurry of, I guess, market euphoria at the time, some of these investments on the right-hand side of the slide, they're down 90-95%, and some of them have proper investors. You've got proper institutional investors out of London and New York who are down 90-95%. So I think that when the market comes back, and I'll talk a little around the commodities later, but there is going to be a flight to quality to assets, and flight to quality, I think, also of management in terms of the depth that we have. And I guess the other observation here is of all of these companies, you've got companies that, if you want direct exposure to the battery thematic, you have to be providing a product that allows you to sit down with the end user. And there's two companies here which have that ability, Jervois and Sherritt. Now, Sherritt is essentially Cuban. So Sherritt has a refinery in Canada, but can't sell its product into the US. Its executives can't even go to the US. So in terms of having there's companies here that want to have a refinery, that want to build a refinery, but we've actually got one with the recent SMP acquisition in Brazil. So that really allows us to have a seat at the table, and you'll see it both with recent hires, with Greg Young joining, ex-head of Glencore USA, and some hires to come in terms of the team we're building and our strategy in terms of really getting a seat with those end users, because that's really where the real value is moving forwards. Just quickly, I mean, board of directors, Peter Johnson, I think most of you would have seen this. Peter ran Glencore's global nickel assets. He also ran WMC Resources nickel business. He and I sat on the Nickel Institute together. We've worked together since 2004 when Xstrata, we did a hostile bid for WMC, and Peter assembled a team of WMC insiders for us, of which Brian Kennedy, another individual there, who you can see is also on the board. So I guess the point is, this isn't the first time we've worked together. We've worked together a long, long time. Mike Callahan, Idaho-based director, very well regarded in that part of the world, which is important. In terms of the management, again, I won't go through all the names, but Ken Clarkson, ex-general counsel of Glencore. For context, I mean, his annual legal bills would have been multiples of our market cap. I think he had 170 in-house lawyers. Michael Rodriguez was operations director at Murrin. Greg Young, as I said, ran Glencore USA, essentially one of the founding partners of Glencore. David Selfie, again, ex-Glencore at Murrin. So there's a group of executives, some named here, some behind the scenes, and we're excited about what we can create, because we do have a level of depth that, unfortunately, I can call on that many CEOs aren't able to at this end of the market. So there's really two assets that I wanted to talk to you around today. Idaho. So the US has no cobalt mine. Cobalt's a strategic commodity. Before I was here in Brazil, I spent the last 4 months in the United States, in Idaho, but also principally in Washington, DC. Cobalt matters. It's up there with rare earths in terms of how the US government looks at it from a strategic perspective, and it's important for aerospace and defense. We want to be part of the solution in terms of creating a secure supply chain that excludes Chinese influence. The Australian government and the US government are working closely together, and we're proud to be an Australian company and to be at the forefront of that. Why we chose Idaho and this operation when we came into the company was really around it's executable, low capital. So we've just recently published a BFS, sub 80 mil capex, IRRs in the 40%. This is an attractive project, and it doesn't require commodity prices to return to astronomical levels in order to be financeable and to get off the ground. 100 mil of investment so far, another reason why we pursued this project. So, I mean, it was really delivered to us on a platter. If you look across this overhead of site, you can see a lot of the risk capital. So the stuff you can't engineer out, civils, earthworks, stuff that if you have capital cost overruns, this is usually where it goes wrong. That's all done. All we've got to do is essentially complete the plant, where you can see the mill pad, the concentrator foundations, and open the portal and build the mine. So all the earthworks, civils, the back of this overhead, you can see the water ponds, dry stack tailings. The green building there is a water treatment plant. That'll be the first thing that we commission next year when the snow melts. We finish that off, commission that, and then the rest of the site work gets underway. We've got power to site around 5 cents a kilowatt hour, a bit under. Communications, all the earthworks, all the civils, all the roads, all done. So this makes a big, big difference in terms of executability, the risk around executability, and also speed in terms of completion. As I said, we published the BFS. I mean, in terms of a quality of package, this project's been around for a long time. This is easily the highest quality study that's been done. High IRRs, low capex, high margins. And I mean, the operating costs here of sub 750 a pound cobalt. I mean, for perspective, I mean, we know what the operating costs in the DRC are. Obviously, we come from Katanga, Mutanda, etc. And the DRC is not as low cost as it was. The logistics, I mean, obviously have always been terrible, but you've also got falling grades, higher consumable costs, expats obviously very difficult to get around during COVID. So we're actually one of the most competitive operations globally. We're small, it's 2,000 tonne of cobalt, it's not 20,000 tonnes, but it's 2,000 tonnes of high margin cobalt in what is the most strategic cobalt market in the world, in the United States. In terms of development schedule, we're currently working on financing, and what this is debt financing. Obviously, we put, as I mentioned at the start, we've got some equity in place to start us off. So we're moving ahead with detailed design in terms of detailed drawings, detailed engineering. That work will be initiated shortly. The long order items are being placed, so that's SAG, tailings filters, and we're talking to project financing. So there's a number of angles on the financing. There's, as I said, I mean, I was obviously in DC for a reason. I'm here in Brazil. We're meeting with BNDES. We're meeting with Investor Sao Paulo Negocios. There's a number, so government in a number of countries is interested. And we're also running a private banking lender financing process, which continues. And with the refinery, which is really a game changer, because previously we were dealing with a concentrate. Now that we have a refinery and we have an ability to offer customers refined product, i.e. that they physically want and they physically consume, that kind of really does open up the playing field enormously. So we're sitting down and we're talking to South Korea, Japan, and also with Greg Young coming on board, who's taking the lead in the US and Europe. So once the snow melts, the site's being closed now. We've had first snow, so it's already getting locked in for we're up at 8,000 feet, as you saw on the other photograph. It's a stunning area, but it's high. So site will be getting closed now for the winter, and then with a view for once the snow melts, Q2 next year, early work starts in earnest. So we finish up the water treatment, as I said, put in place at camp, and then we essentially restart construction Q2. And portal opens Q3, and we'll be in production mid-2022. So that's, again, one of the benefits of all that investment is fast-paced to production. San Miguel Paulista, we recently announced the acquisition of, and we're really excited about this. I mean, it's an asset that isn't well known in Australia just because it was owned by Votorantim, a private Brazilian family company, very well regarded. But this is, for context, this is a 25,000 tonne per annum nickel refinery, 2,000 tonne cobalt. It was designed by Ultratech. It's a sister plant to Harjavalta, the facility, 60,000 tonne facility in Finland that's owned by Norilsk. For context, for those who are Australian in the audience, I mean, this is half the size of Kwinana in terms of nickel capacity. So as you can see there, it's a big facility. It operated for 30, 35 years. Delivering the Tocantins product. So some highlights here, which you can read in your own time. I mean, but this is something for us at Jervois. I mean, obviously we're not all traders, but a big component of the team do have that background, and this really gets us back in the game. So we're excited. Gets us back in the game, sitting down with end users. We're talking to nickel suppliers. We're talking to cobalt suppliers. This is it's an existing facility. It's a proven facility. It's big, it's competitive, has high recoveries, and the brand is known. Here in Sao Paulo today, I was going around and seeing customers and distributors just domestically within the state, and they're excited to have the brand and the product back in circulation again. So it's not, when you commission a new facility, there's a degree of market testing and certification, particularly if you're going to produce sulfates or other chemical-based products. I mean, the exciting thing about this facility, particularly from a banking perspective and a lending perspective, is it's proven. So as I said, 25,000 tonne nickel, 2,000 cobalt. We'll start smaller, but the capacity is there. So historically, the reason that the facility was placed on care and maintenance in 2016 is really, it was based on Nicolangia, a mine also owned by Votorantim in Goiás state. That was placed on care and maintenance. It provided 80% of the fee, and so this facility also closed. Around 20-30% of the materials were provided by third parties, so what's called MHP, mixed nickel hydroxide, from Australia, from New Caledonia, and also cobalt hydroxide, primarily from the DRC. So, as I said, we're currently talking to suppliers with a view to optimising the restart. We're also commencing, it'll be detailed flow sheet test work and mass balances. We're put out to tender for a leading international engineering firms, and there's a proposal that's going to our board this week, which to approve the first phase of that leading up to Christmas, just in terms of really looking at mass balances, impurity removals, and as we start to really optimise the facility, what's the most efficient way to do that. I was at the facility earlier this week, so I just dropped this photo in. This is tank house 1. So there's 3 tank houses. This is just the first one. There are, as you saw from the overhead site, they're in parallel. And this will be we only actually need one for Idaho. So this would be the first one that we'll need only part of actually for Idaho. So you can see it's a lot of capacity. The facility is well maintained, and I'm instructed that next time I go to site for NWR, I'll take some photos with myself there that we can use for social media. But the facility is in good condition. It's being well maintained. Transaction structure, I think this has been run through previously. So 22.5 US. The considerations payment is in reais, but we converted here for US for simplicity. It's a conditional entry, de-risking as we go. For context, if you look at the transaction values of similar facilities which have closed, you're looking at, Coca-Cola would be a precedent, Haja Belta, they're $300, $400, $500 million sort of transactions. So we've acquired this for what I believe to be a very attractive rate for Jervois and its shareholders. I mean, clearly Voto and Tim, they look at us, this will be the 4th facility, the 4th nickel-cobalt refinery that the team's constructed or started. We did Kwinana in Western Australia. That was under Peter Johnson and Michael Rodriguez's direction. Obviously, the team constructed Murrin Murrin and operated Murrin Murrin for a long time. We also ran Nickelverk, which is an 85,000 or 92,000 tonne nickel refinery, 5,000 cobalt. So this is the 4th facility that the team's come into. And I think that gave Voto and Tim confidence that conditionality on the schedule of payments, that it was going to be delivered. The scenarios that we're looking at in our due diligence, we're not limited to these, but this is what we did consider in the due deal, was really looking at Idaho alone, then looking at do we switch out nickel capacity for cobalt and turn it into like a Coca-Cola, a cobalt refinery of substance and scale? Do we look at switching the products, producing more salts, sulfates, obviously for the battery sector? And we also looked at MHP. So obviously it was a nickel refinery in the past. There's a lot of capacity there. The capex to restart is for those scenarios, was 75 to 150 million reais. So for context, with exchange rates at the time of launch, which will be, I guess, less now, we're looking at, say, 13.5 mil US to 27. I mean, for context, the scoping study we had undertaken for Idaho to construct a new dedicated cobalt refinery in Idaho, just for that 2,000 tonnes, was just shy of $200 million. So in terms of bang for your buck, this is the type of opportunity that we became into a public company for, because you can create an enormous amount of value with entry costs like these, provided you have the team to deliver. So the concentrate will be pre-treated. Options are either a roaster in the US, which we designed to BFS standard, or we can potentially POX here in Brazil, which is one of the reasons that I'm here now working through with the team in terms of understanding where it would go at site, how it would go, what it would mean for the existing permitting structure, etc. So we're excited. The feasibility study proper will start in January. As I said, we're engaging an international engineering firm now to undertake those, really get some the greater level of definition around how we look at third-party feeds and what we need to look at and how we should price them. And I hope I've conveyed we're really excited. The quality of the team that we've got on board is high. We're actively talking and looking to bring on additional commercial executives to supplement and in terms of the purchasing that we need to do to reopen the refinery. And we do think it provides a differentiating factor in terms of Jervois. So I guess summary slide, I mean, we're economically aligned. highly economically aligned with other shareholders. We only get paid and we only make money if you do. And we believe in what we're doing. I mean, ideologically, I do believe that what we're doing is important for Australia and the US, and I see no divergence between geopolitical interests and also shareholder interests and our own, obviously. Ultimately, I think that by creating a United States dedicated vehicle that is providing critical materials to the domestic economy in the US, that's going to be valued in a way which is going to be quite differentiated versus other companies out there. And in all of our slides, you'll never see a single, we don't have anything at all ever on either cobalt or nickel. In 3 years, there hasn't been a single slide on the macro. And it's because we know what we're doing. We believe in the macro and we believe it's proprietary. So when we do investment bank roundtables, I get some of the other guys on. If cobalt was easy to substitute, it would have been substituted. Got a lot of respect for what Elon's done, but cobalt's not going anywhere out of the cathode anytime soon. And we've got all the vehicle manufacturers outside of China under NDA, and I can tell you there's no ambiguity about chemistry. It's high nickel with cobalt. So we're excited about the future and happy to take questions.
Thanks so much, Bryce, for that. We've got a question from an investor around your relationship with First Cobalt. Could you maybe talk to us about that? How is the relationship? Is there a relationship? And is there a way for a partnership?
We're constructing, we've got a refinery in Brazil and we're focused on bringing that on, and I wish them all the best for their business. Nicely
said. And could you be using the refinery of Sherritt in Canada for the Idaho project? Question from the same investor there.
I think that as soon as you put anything through Sherritt's refinery, it becomes Cuban by default, and the United States is an important market, so no.
How are you finding the US permitting process on that note of, the US is a hugely important market to Jervois?
Sorry, do you mind repeating the question? I've got a plane flying overhead here in Congonhas.
Sorry. How are you finding the US permitting process?
We're fully permitted. So, I mean, this is an important point. It's a big deal. I mean, obviously Trump's been in the White House for the last 4 years, President Trump, and the permitting environment has been easier, but the US is the US. And certainly the discussions that we're having with the current administration, with the future administration and the transition team, I think one of the differences that we have is the relationship that we have with the tribes, the relationship that we have with the local conservation groups, and the fact that we're fully permitted. That's in the US, that's a big deal. That's a big deal.
It's a big point of difference there. Bryce, are offtake negotiations for the Idaho project on track?
So we're continuing. We've got the flexibility now that we don't have to take the first piece of paper that's pushed across the table. And that was one of the reasons for the equity raise. So what I would say is that if you look on timeline, when we've got the capacity to move forwards for the project with long lead items, detailed engineering, etc. So perhaps we announce an offtake by the end of the year, but perhaps we don't, and we don't have to. So I think that's the key point. I mean, we'll do whatever's in the best interest of Jervois shareholders, and we're unashamedly kind of aligned in that regard. So obviously Greg Young has just recently joined. With the addition of San Miguel has fundamentally changed the structure potentially and the flexibility. Offtake is also potentially linked with some of the discussions and involvements with governments. Now governments don't necessarily move to our pace, and obviously in the United States, I was in the United States up until the day after the election and came down here because I formed a view that the next 60 days were not going to be necessarily that productive dealing with the administration while they go through what's clearly politics aside, a difficult transition process. So, I mean, we're on track, we're excited. I think that we've got a package and an offering now for off-takers, which is just fundamentally different. And it's about making sure we do, you only get one crack at this. And this is the off-take and the financing is the most important thing that this company is going to do in terms of shareholder value for the next, the next year or two at least. So we're very, very focused on getting it right. with the understanding, you know what, we're constructively impatient and we're moving forward. So we're not going to wait for anyone, either any one particular customer or any one particular government forever. But equally, we are going to optimise the capital structure and the commercial structure in terms of how we sell the product.
Can you give us an update on Kabanga, Bryce?
Well, President Magufuli's just been re-elected, and the election process in Tanzania, and there's also an election process underway in Uganda, where we're also in discussions with His Excellency Museveni in relation to the Kalembe mine and KCCL refinery. I don't think elections have necessarily accelerated the decision-making process of government. We continue to be engaged in both African countries. In terms of, obviously, I mean, I've been spending the last 6 months between Australia and Brazil, the US and Brazil. So in terms of an organisational drain, both countries know where we are. We've put in offers. They know we're credible, and they know we're there and waiting. And you know what, the prize in both of those countries, in the event that we're awarded to either Kabanga or Kalembe, is sufficiently material that we will stay engaged and continue talking to governments. But no news specifically on Kabanga.
Well, on that note, we might leave it there for today. Thanks so much, Bryce, for joining us on the line from Brazil.
No problems at all. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.